So I am Indigo Dawn, and I'm here with the compassionate, brilliant, amazing Aaron Johnson, and we're about to chat about his work and also an event that he's presenting at. And I am a trauma recovery human potential coach and a lead organizer for this event, New Culture Summer Camp East, which is July 15th to 24th this year, 2022, in the Mid-Atlantic USA. And a little piece about that, it's 10 days experimental community to explore how we might live together in a way that has maximum joy, maximum safety, and minimum as little fear and as little violence as possible for all of us. Aaron, you want to intro you?
Yeah. My name is Aaron. I'm co-founder of Grief to Action and also co-founder of Holistic Resistance. And also within that body of work, I do a lot of work around the chronically undertouched, specifically the chronically undertouched Black male body, but obviously which is for all people, the majority and all genders. But really focusing on the chronically untouched Black male right now in my work because of the carnage that I am navigating in my personal community, in my own body. I'm really invested in dismantling oppression at every level. Holistic resistance is that. We try and dismantle oppression at every single level, the food we eat, to the housing we live in, to the people we interact with, of how we interact. We just find ways to dismantle oppressive systems, and at the end, to do it from a heart-centered place, to do it from a place that allows us to be human the entire time. None of us are perfect in this narrative, but a lot of us can grow in this area of dismantling oppressive systems, particularly racism. So for me, I really enjoy integrating spaces. I call it intentional integration. I was just up in Northern California at a Back to Nature event. I think it was like maybe 500 to 400 white folks that are gathering after this pandemic and this beautiful event. And I think out of those folks, maybe it was 4 Black folks there, maybe 5, and just like tracking how to integrate that space. I was there to help build the groundwork and give an analysis and be with them in nature and be with them in that space that's really precious and sacred to them, but also not really integrated that well over the last maybe say 7 years or so. And so it's like tracking, and they're working really well together. I think there's progress being made. That's a good example of like what I often go to do and hold a lot of space in that gap between. So holistic resistance, that's one of the things I spend a lot of my time getting excited about, because I see the power of making spaces more accessible to more people. In my case, African heritage folks are one that I'm advocating for.
Yes, I love how you mentioned resistance at every level, dismantling oppressive systems at every level. And that really resonates with what I value and the work that I want to be doing. So you talked about integrating and going to this back to nature, this majority white space, and New Culture, including New Culture East, is majority white. So I'm curious if you could share some of the theory behind what your dismantling looks like in that type of setting. Like what's beneath or behind your integration work in majority white spaces?
Yeah, I was just talking to some folks about this affair, and like, why are we integrating spaces? Why aren't we just making spaces over here that are POC or people majority that's separate? And that's always valuable. I think there's a place you can make separate things happen, but I feel like the world that I would like to live in should reflect nature. When I go into nature, I see a bunch of plants coexisting, trees supporting smaller plants. I see ants supporting, beetles. I see all the ecosystem of how things actually work. And so for me, I remember sitting with some folks in the rewilding community, and I said, it's amazing how diverse nature's around you, but yet how monocrop the actual population you actually are in it with. Like, you guys are more like, big agriculture in your actual population, and yet you get all these models of diversity all around you, but yet they could tell me like a footprint of a quail or a sliver of a snake or a bear droppings that look a certain way, and they can tell you all that, but not recognize how all these systems are working together and how that's a model for us as people, human beings, that we get to be also that diverse. And so what we find is that white folks will create these beautiful environments, these very, very amazing environments that oftentimes are in these like nature settings, which I think is amazing, and not quite understand why after 5 years, 6 years, 20 years, what it might be, that there's a lack of diversity, and they might look around and maybe it's a flashpoint of maybe election of a president, or maybe there's a death publicly that brings some evaluation. So for me, as a person that does intentional integration, I look for communities that are trying to notice themselves. And I try and come in not just with a loving, caring heart, but just to understand that's where we all want to start from anyway. And to come in with I call it having carnage informed behavior. And that might sound aggressive, but we're talking about, and a good example of that, and I've done this with several groups, is really tracking that um, there's a horrific history that's under taught, under shared, under noticed in this country called lynching. This is an example of just what we're tracking. And so when you go into any part of a rural area where there's beautiful, huge trees and there's maybe no cell phone reception, it's just this gorgeous nature-based space, for a lot of white folks, it's like, this is utopia, this is heaven. And for people, global majority, it can be also powerful too, but there's also a layer that I've been processing for a long time, I say almost 10 years now, of what we call tree material, lynching material, of what it means for Black folks specifically to be next to and around these trees in white controlled spaces. Just that alone, but it's a lot of echoes around that, around sexuality, the Black root. But I say that because when I talk about integration, to bring that kind of awareness into a community that might not have asked any of these questions for a period of, say, 10 years, a period of 5 years, even a period of 12 months, I've never asked that question or really analyzed that, it might feel like new information to them. It might even feel like a little bit of fictitious behavior, other than the fact that they find Black folks struggle with showing up for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons might be there's some low-key trauma there. I said low-key, it's not low-key, it's huge trauma, but it might not show up as big. For me, even when I found out about myself, I was like, I grew up and I never went camping as a family. My parents never took me out to nature. It was not something my cousins ever did. Our church events never were to go to the forest. What was up with that? And I saw my counterparts, other white churches that were more like white populated churches, totally out in nature, at ponds, on the river, doing river events. And it's like, it wasn't only economics, there was some trauma there, some water trauma and some tree trauma that wasn't even addressed. And so I say that what I do is I do intentional integration. I don't come in with a plan of like, this was gonna happen. I come in with a observation ear. I come to listen. I come to track the trauma stories that are present in any given space, and then build some custom awareness to a conversation that's more listening, to build out a plan, build out some strategies, to build some thinking, some co-thinking. I don't think for anyone, I think with everyone, to create a space so that we can start to ask questions that oftentimes aren't asked in white controlled spaces, or aren't oftentimes even challenging the status quo. And so that's kind of what I do. I try and go in there and not like rock the boat. I try and take the boat and expand it and build some more timber under the bottoms where it can handle some rougher waters. I try and add some different rooms we can go to and have safe spaces. And so when the boat starts to rock, it's not just being rocked, it has resources to sustain itself. And so for me, that's kind of how I look at going to a space, is I want to try and build those kind of energetic containers within communities that have the potential, that have the raw material, because of privilege and because of lack of diversity, that's never been assembled and put together. And so for me, that's one of my desires in any community, but specifically cultures that are doing profound, beautiful, tender work in nature-based spaces and are not integrated.
Yes, this something that what you talked about evokes for me is the value of truth and exposing what's always been there, what's always been true, what's been beneath the leaf, beneath the soil even, but has been an integral part of the way a space works. It's like this tree material has been there for some folks, for some Black folks that have shown up at New Culture events, but I learned about it from you. Like, I didn't know it was there. And to me, that is sacred work. This moving towards truth, even if it's difficult, even and when it's uncomfortable, because truth brings healing, truth brings connection, truth brings real harmony rather than fake postured harmony that ignores truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
real intimacy,
Yes.
real connection,
Yeah.
real safety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that.
That's real. Mm. Mm.
And just because connection's the last word that I said, I know, at least in your bio, you say that a big part of your dismantling white supremacy work is from that place of deep, real connection. And anything you want to say about that?
Oh yeah, totally. There's a song that my little sister, right under me, I'm in the middle of 5, right under me, wrote, and it's on her album right now. And there's a phrase in there I have been using in my morning meditations I've been on traveling for the last 13 days. And it says, lay your heart on my soul. Lay your heart on my soul. And I was talking to her about it because I was driving up here. I was driving up here by myself, and 10 hours by myself in the car. And I'm talking to her and I say, like, what do you mean? Like, I kind of hear what you mean, but can you tell me what you mean when you say lay your heart on someone's soul? And she's like, I'm trying to get words that describe the maximum closeness. Like, can you get closer to someone's heart laying on your soul? And if that's happening, she said, we're talking about that. I said, I hear that. Oppression can't fit in between that. All the isms can't fit when you lean your heart on somebody's soul. That is a form of resistance. Capitalism, racism, all those isms are trying to do what we kind of came to earth doing. We come into the earth, our soul is leaning on our mother's soul. That's like how we came into the world. And I think what happens is when we get out into the world, it starts to realize that we have to remember that. I'm gonna be clear that we know how to dismantle all these oppressions. It's in our body. And one of the things I say about connection is I just want to remind us how connected we can be. Right. I remember I was sitting across from an elder. She was like maybe in her 70s or maybe late 60s, white person. And we were practicing holding each other's hand because the prompt wasn't this kind of deep dive was, if you've never held the hand of a Black man just in your life, that I'm in this workshop, I want to invite you just to, for the first time, come over and hold my hand and just be with me. I think I had a question that came in, it was a while ago. We were in the city of Oakland. She comes over, she's holding my hand. And she's like, Aaron, I can't believe I've been in the city of Oakland all these years. I'm in my 70s. I've never held the hand of a Black man for more than 3 minutes and had any kind of attention for it. Just never done it. I didn't think about it. Until you prompted the question, there's a list of people. It was maybe a room of 12. I think about 7 of them had never done it in their entire life. And we're sitting there holding hands. She said, your hands are so soft and they're this, and I'm just noticing I'm feeling nervous and I'm feeling all these feelings. I'm just, wow, this is what? And we're having this moment recognizing the power of just being close. Right now, we had a bunch of different things around that topic, and the workshop was going powerful. But what we found is that she says, I have been arrested at protests on behalf of Black folks. I have donated thousands of dollars on behalf of Black folks. And I've never took the time to create an environment where I could sit and actually hold and be close and notice them. She said it was easy to march because the whole city was marching. It was easy to donate money because we all need to reparations to that place and to help the cause. She said, but what I realized, it was a much more bigger challenge to recognize what it meant in myself to slow my life down, to track all my traumas and all the propaganda I've received and realize, can I actually practice being close? So to me, connection is a foundational block to holistic resistance. It's a foundational block of what I'm talking to you right now. Deep, human, authentic connection is not something that is common in the United States. It's as uncommon. And I always say this a lot. It's as uncommon. I want you can go test this right now. You can go to Harvard, Yale, USC, Cal Arts, the obscure, Johns Hopkins, go to the best educational funded institutions in the United States. Walk into their admission office and go, I'm so excited to be here. Can you please point me into the direction of the listening department? Where is the listening department? You'll see them go, I'm sorry, so what did you say? I didn't really hear. A listening department? We don't have a listening department. That is America right there. Mm-hmm. We have mass media, filmmaking, all of it. But we don't have a practice of listening. And listening is oxygen to connection, right? So people are like, oh, I love connection. They have no attention to listen. You aren't connecting. So for me, I recognize that oftentimes when I go into any white community, I go into any collective group, I always track what is the attention. Is this a listening community? Or as soon as we say the word racism, the ears just shrivel up, the attention drops, or the fragility comes in and starts plugging the ears up, or do they have attention? Their ability to listen is equivalent to their ability to be connected, right? And I've been amazed that I've seen a lot of performance of connection, but there's not a lot of listening. I think consent is a good example. When I think how consent is taught, it's hard to teach consent if listening is not a part of it, right? You know,
Totally.
we just can't do it. We can't do it. So I look at that concept because people, oh, I get that part. I can hear really well around consent. They teach you, and then they get racism. I can't hear. I'm confused. I can't hear. What did you mean? What did you mean? I don't understand what you meant, Aaron, because now I'm having a hard time hearing because all of a sudden my defenses are here in the way, right? I've been in a similar boat, right? In my journey, learning about my patriarchy, my own listening is important. So my point is that when I talk about connection, it's a code word for listening, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's not only a code word, there's a level that they're almost blended together, almost inseparable. And so for me, I look at resistance, when I look at oppression, look at these horrific images of lynching. I spent the whole time teaching my workshop, The United of the Black Root, and I've spent a lot of time with lynching imagery. The last 6 weeks, I've been studying them almost every day for multiple hours a day to get into the history that has been undertaught to me. I look at it and I notice that what's really powerful is the stories the newspapers would tell that would justify a biblical reason of why we have to hang this person of low majority, or particularly Black man, for a false accusation. Why God is a story. It's the story that they listened to that justified many years of carnage that we're trying to not hear anymore. So I say that because when I look at this mass shooting in Buffalo, it's the stories that this man was taking into his body that helped stoke the fire to cause the carnage that we have to deal with it. And there's more stories being get out, and we want to tell new stories and have ears that can listen to those new stories to stop this kind of carnage. So when I talk about connection, it is a foundational piece. It is a foundational piece of everything else going forward. People always say, Aaron, well, what books do you recommend? What podcasts do you recommend? And I'm a big fan of podcasts. I'm a big fan of books. But I say, what good is a good book? What good is a good podcast if you're not listening? So the question I have is not what you're reading. Is how are you flexing, analyzing your listening ear? And that one listening ear speaks to the collective ear. So there's like an ear of individual. Maybe you're talking, there's an ear. What's the collective ear of new culture? What is the collective ear? How do you all collectively listen? And also has that kind of paradigm small groups. So for me, that's what I'm constantly analyzing when I think about connection. I really drop into, when I hear connection, for me, it's almost like I almost hear listening at the same time. That's how intertwined they are for me. So for me, that's how I look at those two pieces around connection, is how are they built? Is connection like a Vegas kind of connection where you're just like having a lot of fun, a lot of alcohol, and a lot of bright lights? Is that the connection you're talking about? Or is connection kind of the thing you have at an elder's home when your loved one that you've been with for a long time and they're on their deathbed and they're just maybe singing a song and you're being with them, you're in grief and in joy of knowing them and grief of losing them? That's connection as well, right? Mm-hmm. So it's tracking like what kind of connection we're talking about. We're talking about the connection that allows you to put your life on the line to dismantle oppression, because you realize that if we don't dismantle oppression, that's all of us are going to suffer. If we realize, is that kind of connection you have, or is it more of just like I posted on Instagram that Black Lives Matter and I posted on my Facebook, I'm done, I'm connected. Is that it? Is that the only piece? But is there a connection that allows us not just to go from one event to another, but from this event on into the rest of our lives? So that's where I'm at when I think about connection and its resilience and its critical part of the work that I do and the work that I see being done.
Yes, there are so many pieces that I would draw to go deep with that you pulled out. But instead, I'm going to ask you, what will you be bringing to New Culture Summer Camp East this year? And I know that we're still in the listening phase, like we're going to have a gathering with folks of the global majority who've attended past New Culture East events, and really we're still in the process of discerning what exactly you're going to bring, but maybe the energy of it, or just any piece that if folks are curious, like what might you be bringing to camp?
Culture of questions, right? I can already tell that the people there are intelligent, powerful, innovative people that are bucking against status quo in many areas of American culture. So I would like to bring a culture of questions that I feel probably haven't been asked, or they have been asked, there hasn't been a container around them to really allow them to truly do their work, right? And I think to me, one thing I remember going to my first intentional integration event where I was maybe about 5 years ago or more. Pandemic kind of throws me off. It could have been more than that, but I think it was about 5 years ago. I went to this event and I remember they had a closed optional swimming area, which I'm really a fan for, not a problem with a closed optional on paper, right? And this is also no surprise in nature, beautiful, back in nature. I don't know if someone's even working in this area, really rural, gorgeous space. And it's not only a closed optional, it's closed optional for families. Like, so you can be whole entire families there, which is, again, I think amazing to have entire families having closed optional swimming area. Again, I advocate for that. And I watch, there's like, Aaron, why did you go swimming? Do you have a problem with this, or why didn't you go? And I was like, well, I didn't have a problem with it on paper, but I realized that this event's been going on for 25 years. I'm the first adult Black male body here, and the only, and this is like about 300 people here, the only adult Black male body here. And so before I just enjoy myself, take off all my clothes and go prancing off into the water with all the white families that may or not, some of these children have not even seen a Black person in their life. I'm the first Black person they've ever seen in their life. So I realized that I know there is some racist material present in this space. I know the Black root narrative has not been questioned or checked or analyzed, that no one's asking any questions about lynching or any questions about the Black root narrative in their families, and the white men that are there are tracking me like a hawk, and they don't even know they're tracking me because they can't help themselves. I understand that because I am there watching my own back. I said, so I said all that to them. They looked at me and they said, I've never thought of that. So I said some more questions about, what if this happened, I've never, so by the fifth time I heard, I never thought of that, I realized there was a whole lot of thinking that this community had not been doing because it never had to actually integrate the space. And so for me, I know there are people, the majority have already shown up to New Culture, but I also know that the numbers are not high enough to really bring in the questions that will come as things grow. It's not just the higher numbers, but also just the presencing of what happens when we have a white majority impact culture setting. The culture oftentimes smothers good questions, or the questions don't sink as deep as possible. So what I hope to bring, my heart to bring, is to bring a commitment to loving through the carnage and loving through the questions, and not just loving through, but building containers and some scaffolding to allow us to have a culture that I can step away and it's still happening. It is still being facilitated. It's just still working us. I love it. My gifts, or when I get emails 6 months after a workshop, I go, Aaron, I hated this question when you asked it at that one workshop. I've been wrestling with it for 6 months, and this is what happened. It's been working me, and I'm saying, like, this question, working this question for 6 months, and it was asked in all of like maybe 30 seconds. I want a culture that doesn't take a good question. That was great. No, that was great. Moving on. I want a question like, let it marinate in the spirit. Let it marinate in the spirit. And I want to encourage the marination of the spirit in the white culture here that is trying to think about. And those questions I want to hear. I'm open to hearing that early on, but 5 years from now, I want to hear, I never thought of that on every clear analysis of oppression. I want to be like, oh, we've been thinking about that. And we've been marinating on that in our spirit here. And this is what we've concluded. That I, or any person in the global majority, is not doing the lion's share of thinking. That we'll do it early on, but we want to make sure that it starts a momentum of culture. I hope to bring a culture of questions that require us, or invite us, I should say, not require, but invite us to understand that we can be connected through these, not divided through them. That these can be questions that can help us be divided, not divided in the context of how racism can end up in groups. And there's always some kind of rift that happens as material, but it's really tracking that we're not leaning into conflict as success, right? But looking at, this can be a tool-led conflict. We can be in conflict and we use our tools in that conflict, or are we going to let trauma lead? And that's what I'm trying to bring in a tools-led healing container around questions. And I know those questions are going to be kind of curated through the hearts and minds of folks. And I refuse to have a curriculum all nailed down without talking to the people that are actually there. But that's what we're working on. But I know whatever I'm getting to get filtered through that part of the system.
Yes, I love that. Something that came up for me is, my hope is that the questions you ask, that I and we, the community, New Cultures community, will also feel about the questions and practice resilience. And like you said, continuing to show up for connection, even when it's not, I don't know, orgasmic, like even when it's not like skipping down the dirt road, but when it's gritty, and when it's neutral, just the whole range of feeling around these questions.
And I think that there's going to be some grief. And I would even encourage, and I appreciate the orgasmic reference, because I feel like there's orgasms and grief. These don't have to be separate. And I think there's probably some orgasmic grief spaces that we need to be in. if there ever is a flag they probably should put in the ground here, probably some orgasmic grief in this
Yes.
work.
Yes, totally, totally. And I'm very much of my worldview is that at the core of every feeling, every emotion is God. That's my how I feel and view. That's how I live. So I totally agree. Slash source slash non-denominational power of expansive good. Okay, for you, like as a human, you mentioned what you've really been marinating in with the lynchings and some of the work you've been doing recently. And it could be the same or different, but what's the edge that you're playing in your life right now, or an edge?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that I've been spending so much time, probably the last 6 weeks, with this lynching material, probably more intently than I have in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I've been having some powerful dreams around that aren't necessarily nightmares by no means, but just really powerful dreams around being really present with these horrific and important images. And when I think of the edge of my work right now, I think of sitting, holding the hand of another Black man who's a straight Black man, and just listening to him. Maybe he's grieving, maybe he's laughing, but just being connected and holding his hand, or maybe some physical contact, or maybe even like he's grieving, I'm holding his body, just being close. And that might feel like not an edge when I look at the horrific images or the lynching or the work I do around integration or going to use rural white spaces. But I find that when I look at where I have done the most work and the most transformative labor, and where I keeps me up at night, is the CUT project, the chronically undertouched work that I do with young Black men. All Black men are welcome here, and at the same time, young cis straight Black men are the ones that are more likely to feel like violence is a good response to thoughtful platonic touch, and that their manhood identity and their value is based upon them not having thoughtful platonic touch. And the CUT project is right now being worked as a film, a documentary specifically, and I find myself in more grief with how the Black brute narrative and oppression has effectively, as of right now, effectively told a story to many young Black men and Black men in general that tender, thoughtful touch is not available to them, that it's something they should never be a part of, or that it diminishes their value. And it's heartbreaking because I also know that depression, violence, and a lot of things we're doing right now is because 80 to 90% of the Black men I work with, more like 99% of the Black men I work with, are somewhere on the chronically undertouched state. And I think about that when I think about how I birthed this idea of the chronically untouched. I remember talking to a young man who was in distress, and I said, when was the last time you had 3 minutes of platonic, thoughtful touch by another Black man or anyone? He said, I can't think of 3 minutes in the last 12 months where I've had thoughtful, platonic, touch to my body. I've been boxing, I've been wrestling, I've been arrested, I've been in fights, but I have not had 3 minutes. Even 3 minutes in the last 12 months, the math, those are bad numbers. And he could even go back to 2 years. He went back 15 years to his grandfather, had him on his knee, bounced him on his knee. The last time he had thoughtful, platonic touch from another Black man, another human being.
Wow.
And that to me is my edge. That to me is work I'm going to be doing for the next probably 30 years and learn a whole lot in. I'm about 7 years into the journey. And that to me sits at the foundation of what kind of environment I can create where Black folks, and particularly Black men, can show up as full human beings and not be confused about that process. And I'm invested in it. So that's where I'm edging it right now.
That sounds like super important work.
Thank you.
Yeah. A way that I feel awe that comes up in response to that around you is it seems like your capacity to hold grief and still also be outward and engage. And that's a way that I look up to you or see you as someone I'd like to be more like, and the amount of grief, pain, difficulty that I have capacity for in my body, in my dreams, in my psyche, while still going about my life believing that it's worth living and it can be wonderful too, and acting powerfully. Yeah. That comes up for me to say.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Wow.
Okay, last minute. I am super excited to meet you in person, in the flesh, have our bodies be in the same space in July, just under 2 months. And watchers, I would love to see you also at summer camp this year for Aaron's work and also other super amazing humans too. Any last words?
I'll just sing one quick phrase to that song.
Yeah.
Lay your head on my pillow. Lay your heart on my soul. Lay your head on my pillow. Lay your heart on my soul. I'll leave it right there.